Regreso de toro. Ven aquí, mami, canta el coro. Rico.toro on the microphone. Take off your clothes, mami, quita la pantalón. Google Translate that. I've been freestyling somewhat in Spanglish longer than most of you new jacks have even heard of Sosua. Especially you dudes that can't even pronounce Sosua. Calling it Sosua. It's Sosua. Anyways, today's not a literature or language lesson. So, talk a little bit about some misconceptions that many of us have about women, particularly in Sosua. And, you know, there are some, whether they be independent private contractors on Pedro Clisante, or whether they work in a bank, supermarket, cable company, or otherwise. So, no particular order, just a couple common misconceptions. Starting with one. All women in Sosua are fair game and have a price. False. See, some of them don't want or need your money or mine. Some of them gotta really like you. For instance, you know, some of them you can't just be on vacation and go in the bank or the supermarket and after like Google translated conversation or hola como está, you know, be asking them what would it take? What would it take to get with them? You know, because they don't get down like that. Not all of them get down like that, you know, and it's kind of disrespectful to make any sort of assumptions, you know. And one disclaimer before I get any deeper into this is I don't believe all, never, like when guys use words like they always do this, they all do that, they never do that, or this. You're gonna always have to do this. I usually don't speak in such generalizations because it's just not fair. You know, no fairly intelligent person really believes that, because there's always, the one thing that there is always exceptions. And the one never is never say never. So, you know, so there's a lot of misconceptions there. So, you know, a lot of times, you know, the girls that work in the bars, the banks, the restaurants, etc., some of them do freelance a little on the side. No mistake about it. But does that mean they will go with just anybody? Absolutely not. So it's best to go in there, get to know them a little bit, get a little vibe for them, you know, without assuming that you can go in there day 2 of your first trip and just be like, what's it gonna take? Has it worked for some guys in the past? Yes, I'm sure it has. But is that normal? No. One friend of mine, I call him the job stalker, because, you know, in this, you got to be here long term or pretty frequently for it to work. But, you know, he, you know, has a couple favorite restaurants, a couple favorite bars, you know, or it could be the cable company, or he goes pays his electric bill in person. But, he'll have a couple of targets, and he'll just go in there repeatedly as a regular, chit-chat a little bit, chop it up with them. And this guy speaks Spanish, but more importantly, communicates like a Dominican. So he's all about that connection. Lives pretty comfortably here, as well as his spot in the States, but he doesn't lead with money. He doesn't talk about what he has. He doesn't show money. He doesn't present money. He just gradually works on them, feels them out, and if he feels the vibe and the connection come along, then he asks them out on a date and goes from there. Most of the time he eventually closes the deal. Sometimes he doesn't. But he doesn't lead with money. And that's what I recommend with those that, have legit day jobs. And, just play the job stalking role, as I call it. So don't assume they go with anybody. And then, another side of that, the professional contractor Pedro Casante type girl. Don't assume they go with just anybody. You typically don't want the ones that just go with anybody. I mean, granted, some days they're better off than others and have preferences, and some days they don't, depending on their desperation or level of need. But you can't always tell, don't put them all in the same box, is what I'm saying. So, and some do have certain values and codes. For instance, and I've been shot down before, and I've seen some that I deal with shoot down others because they were friends or associates of mine. And like I say, I've been shot down in the same circumstance, and sometimes, and then to guys that have never traveled abroad and dabbled a little bit in the what did I used to call it? I forgot what I coined the phrase a while back. I can't even remember. But because I didn't like pay for play. But guys that dabble in travel, they've never been abroad, they assume that every girl in the game is getting pounded 10 times a day, 7 days a week. And that's also not the case. Because one, they don't always get called. Their messages don't always get answered. They don't always get chosen. You follow me? Some go days, if not weeks, in between opportunity. Some of the better looking ones even do. Some of those that consider themselves top shelf, they'll hold out. They'll hold out till they get closer to their rate. If they're not getting their rate, they will hold out, a day or two, sometimes longer, and just gamble that they'll get an opportunity when they need it most for what they're willing to do. Some just come out of the barrio from time to time, want a little something to throw some groceries on the table, some Pampers and pay to keep the lights on. So they'll just come out when they have an opportunity once or twice a week. And they're good with that. They don't want a whole lot of strange dudes running up in them. So don't assume that they all go with just anybody and they all get pounded out 10 times a day, 7 days a week. Just not the case. I mean, some enjoy sex more than others and don't turn away no money. They'll go hard for sometimes a weekend or two. I call them in the army, trying to be all they could be. And then they'll go back to Santo Domingo or wherever the hell they came from. But, and like I say, They enjoy sex. They ain't turning away no money. They're trying to get all they can in a short time. And, another thing is, don't assume that when they go back to their hometown that they're also working as well. Don't assume that, because some might be, some may not be. Some may be just chilling with their families, their kids, and living off what they earned in Sosua for a while, a couple of weeks, sometimes months at a time. So another thing, don't assume that they're all broke. They're all from poor families. They all been abused. They all been, they're all stupid. Don't assume that. There are some very nice middle-class neighborhoods in Puerto Plata, Santiago, San Domingo. All over this country, there is a lot of middle-class areas, and some come from very decent families. I've actually met some girls that told me they actually had a pretty good childhood. They had pretty decent parents, both working, good values. They just chose to do what they do at some point, fast money, whatever. And so don't feel bad like they're all like indigent. So another thing, don't assume that they all have Dominican or Haitian boyfriends. Because while I would say the better looking young ones usually got somebody they can call, they have somebody, but sometimes they're in between relationships and they're just working. Sometimes they're fresh off a breakup. It might be a couple of months, might be a week, but sometimes they are in between and they're not actually committed to a Dominican or a Haitian. So don't assume that, and especially when they get around past 25, sad to say, but when they get past 25, many of them are viewed by the locals as used and abused trash, and they discard them. They don't want them after they've been working, the streets or the life, but after a certain amount of time. So don't make that assumption. And then there's one in particular that I know. I've known her since was 23. She's now 30. Does not have any children. And some of my close friends, if they have me watching this, they'll know exactly who I'm talking about. But she told me soon as she started using her box as a source of income, one, she knew she was of less value to a Dominican of any value, and she didn't want anybody that she felt was less value than her, and so just couldn't see herself basically giving it away to someone of little or no value. And thought that was interesting, and which goes into the next misconception. They're always lying, or they all lie. Well, that's true and false. Here's what I mean. I'll use a perfect example. So, one that I know well, when she came up from her hometown recently, she asked me, basically, we do what we do, sometimes we don't. But she asked me, could she crash in my spare room for the night if need be or whatever. I said, all right. Well, yeah, told her later. I go to bed between 12 and 12:30. She said, okay. Well, I don't see her again. And then the next day, she's telling me the police picked her up and all this stuff. And I said, okay. So then later that day, she says, before she goes back to her hometown, she's going to stay at some resort with a client for 2 days. And I saw her statuses and everything, and I believe her. Well, the weird thing about that is, A, the police thing I think was a lie. So that's the truth to them lying. And B, the resort thing with the client, she was telling the truth. So they lie, but they pick weird things you think like I think she should have just told me she didn't come the first night because maybe she found a good last minute opportunity, and that's why she didn't come. And then the second day, she didn't need to tell me anything at all about the client for 2 days before she goes back home. That was like too much information to me. But so my point is, they lie about things they don't have to lie about sometimes, and sometimes they give you brutal honesty. And so read what you will with that, but I don't think that I think sometimes they just can't help themselves, but I don't think it's fair to say that they always lie, or they all always lie. Again, with those strong, definitive words, all and always. So sometimes they lie, sometimes they tell the truth. Let's leave it at that. And another misconception is they'll always take the Dominican side. While I do agree, they are nationalists, but a good one. If she's tight with you, she'll take your side. She don't want to see you taken advantage of. I've had some like, we've been in the taxi, they whispered in my ear, what's he charging you? And I tell her, for instance, okay, he wants 1,200 pesos to go to Puerto Plata. She says, just give him 1,000 and you'll probably be okay. And she was right. See? As opposed to saying, give him 1,500, or give him the 1,200, and I've had situations like that happen a couple times, between a couple different girls that I've gotten to know kind of well. So, I just think that some of the, a lot of people like to throw around that word facts. I hate that shit. One, because it's just like followers following other dudes using certain overused phrases and things because it seems trendy. So, or whatever. But anyways, I think a lot of things come down to perceptions and conceptions. So, in a lot of guys' experiences, it's about, sometimes it's 60 or 70% of them just choosing the wrong women, and 30 or 40% of the guy. Sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes it's 70%, 60, 70% the way the guy presents himself, showing what he has too much, leading with money, talking about things he has just because he feels good talking about things, and it's 70% him and only 30, 40% of the woman just, taking advantage. But if the guy wasn't presenting like that, she wouldn't have took advantage to begin with. She would have been, basically on his side or whatever. And so those are just a couple of misconceptions out there for y'all to think about. Rico Toro, thumbs up. Subscribe if you hadn't already done so.